Before we proceed, Mr. Vani, Mr. Pretorius, I'm informed that yesterday one of the people attending the proceedings came forward to mention that his brother was also detained there and he was thrown out and he fell down. Now, my clerk sent that person to either you or Mr. Vani. Do you know about that?
I did have no inquiries, my lord. Really, that could be very important, yeah.
It's very important. Apparently, it happened in around 76. And that information is important to the extent that it may be relevant here. I think it needs to be investigated. And you'll recall that in my opening statement yesterday, I made a call to the public for people to come forward. It is situations such as this which may not have got the kind of profile that this particular hearing has, which may be similar to this and may be of assistance to us. So it's important that hopefully the media will then make it clear to those who may be having such information to come forward, and when they do, we'll refer them to you. And I hope with the assistance of the captain there, we'll be able to investigate. And we're not going to go into the merits of that, but to see to what extent it could be relevant to the current proceedings. That is what I'm interested in.
By all means, my lord. We'll immediately follow up. And all I want to say also, if they don't feel comfortable with us, they can always come through Weber and Bensel also if they're not comfortable with us, my lord.
Yes, if every such people coming forward will need to have that information verified, investigated, verified, and to see to what extent it will be relevant to what we're having.
We'll do it immediately, my lord.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Vani, we are continuing with Mr. Esop this morning.
Mr. Lord, just to confirm, I have checked with my instructing attorney, and we're not aware of this particular incident, but we're also happy to assist where we can.
Yes, please. My registrar here will refer such people to yourself and to Mr. Pretorius, and please follow up. I would like to know about it.
As the court pleases.
Yes. Mr. Esop, if you're ready, you can come through. You're still under oath? You took the oath yesterday, you remember?
Yes.
Yes, you're still under oath?
Yes, I accept that.
We'll proceed. Yesterday when we adjourned, I requested you to have a look at your statement.
Yes.
And see if you can pick up anything that you might have either de-emphasized or not mentioned at all. Did you pick up any signs?
Yes, I think there were a few points, but the one point in particular was the method of the mule kick that was used on me during the interrogation when I was tortured. I'm not too sure I sufficiently emphasized the impact it made on my body and the effects it had on me both physically and psychologically. As I had explained yesterday, the mule kick was something that security officers executed on me by asking me to sit on a non-existent chair and then kicking me from the sides or with their feet, or sometimes they obviously wore heavy shoes or even with their heels. Now, done over a fairly long period, the effect is that the legs stiffen a lot. And at times I was obviously trying to you cannot squat sit in a kind of a squatting position for too long. So you sort of rise, and they still kept on kicking. So after a considerable period, probably even more than half an hour and maybe even 40 minutes, their legs actually stiffen. And the legs are like rods, almost immovable rods. This is the method that was used by two officers, but it was also repeated by another officer who single-handedly executed this form of torture. you are there as a detainee, and it makes you almost like a stiff rod. You're obviously suffering a lot of pain, and I even remember that at times I was such a stiff, stiffic, I suppose, constituted now, both anatomically and physiologically, that even a touch on me like this would throw me, in one motion down, as if you're throwing a rod down, right? And then if I was on the ground, they would still keep on kicking. So this was absolutely devastating in terms of survival, I would say.
Yes. And I'll go back to the time when you were admitted to the hospital. Were you conscious at that time, or you didn't have an idea what was happening to you?
My memory of that whole period, from the time I am taken away from John Foster Square, and I am first in General Hospital and then at Hendrik Vervoort Hospital, is very hazy. I cannot say I have any real level of consciousness. I cannot recollect much at all. I cannot give you an account. I don't have that memory. I would say, in some kind of daze, in some kind of coma. I'm just not well. In fact, there's one statement made by one of the nurses who said, this guy's not going to make it.
So the period, let's now pin down the period. You were arrested with Mr. Timol on the 22nd of October, Friday.
That's right.
And to the best of your recollection, you were in the hospital on Tuesday, the following Tuesday.
26 years.
26, on Tuesday the 26th.
I've also recorded it on the basis of documents I cited later from the two cases that were heard in court, where my father, protested against the torture that was meted out to me. Yes. And there was an initial hearing by Justice Margot, and later, that was on the 28th of October, and then on the 25th of February, there was a second hearing by two justices. One was Justice Saron.
Yes, we'll try.
And I checked all those documentation, and that's where I got a lot of the information too. I also checked all the newspapers about what had happened to me.
So we're talking a period of about four days of torture. Friday
I would say
evening.
Continuous torture, 4 days, maybe a little more.
Well, okay. Now, during that period, and this is critical for this particular hearing, you said that there were some of the people, interrogators, who kept coming in pairs, and creating an impression that they've been talking to somebody who could have had the same information you had with that was only between you and Mr. Timol.
Yes, I definitely got that impression. Some of the questions that were posed to me related to the underground work that Timol and I did. And that information would have not been known to anyone except, in my view, to Timol.
Can you recall who in particular were these interrogators?
Well, the one name I do remember very well is Furi.
Furi.
Yeah.
And do you know his rank? Were you familiar with
Yeah,
his
he was of a senior rank. I think he was a colonel, but I'm not. I cannot say that that I'm absolutely sure of that. But I do have a record of it in my in accounts I've got. I've got a proper record of his rank.
How many times could he have come in and out?
Well, he was the one who interrogated me also at Newlands Police Station. He came in the vault leading from Office 1013 a good few times. He was, I would say, I think there was also Gloy. There was also Gloy. 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 I think his rank was also high.
Yes.
I must also say to your Lordship that I did not come to know the names of all the interrogators, and later I was trying to locate pictures of the interrogators in the newspapers, and I did find a good few pictures, but a lot of the interrogators, I don't think they even figured in the newspapers.
Oh.
I would say they were a big team.
I see, yes. So it was several teams that kept coming in.
Yeah, I would say they worked in a team. They took, they had shifts, and if I made a rough count, even then I made a count, and later when I tried to write things up, in my case alone, I would say I must have encountered probably more than 15 interrogators.
Who came at different times?
At different times, not at any single moment. Most of the time, there were 2, sometimes even 3, and occasionally 1.
Okay.
But I should also add here, like I said yesterday, never was I ever alone. And I think that's the point I really want to emphasize. I was never at any single moment alone. Never.
And would you be able to recognize these people if pictures or anything could be shown to you?
Yes, some of them, I would say. Some of them. It's a lot of years ago. I have some of the newspaper pictures myself.
Because it's essential. I'm
Yes.
more particularly interested in those you say came to you who could have had information probably received from Mr. Timol. And it means, for example, that it may well be that they were also interrogating Mr. Timol.
Yes.
Those are the ones I'm more interested in, to find out if you could identify those people for that purpose.
Yes, if I have the opportunities to see pictures, I would gladly look at them, and I could identify perhaps at least saying that yes, I seen that person, or if I knew the name, I would confirm that.
And the documents you said you perused on your release relating to your interrogation, were there hospital records?
Sorry, which documents you're referring
The
to?
hospital records about your,
Yes.
your staying at the hospital.
Well, there were 2 sets. One is a whole collection of newspaper articles,
Yes.
and the other are the court records, the exact records from the court in on the 28th of October 1971, and the second court records the 25th of February 1972.
There were medical records included there.
Yeah, my father had got hold of all the records he could, and we can make both records. We have I did have the second record available to me, and we have identified the first record as well. So we can make the 2 records available, and that could be put as exhibits in this inquest.
Yes. And the kind of injuries you sustained during
Yes.
the interrogation, could you describe that to us in full?
Well, I have mentioned the stiffening of my body, particularly my legs, that they became like rods. I think there were marks on my body. I think there were marks on my face. I was bleeding at different times from different parts of my body, often from my face, from my mouth. I think there were wounds on my chest. There were scratches as well, bruises of various sorts. There were sort of dark sort of spots on my legs, above my knee, right? In other words, my thighs. That's what I would say about what I would have noticed myself.
Yes. And on the hands, on the wrists here?
There were probably some injuries there too, but and then the tufts of hair pulled out from my scalp, just tufts and tufts. That was in Colonel Freiling's office when Sergeant Klein, the guy who had arrested together with his colleague, Timol and I, and he had pulled out a certain amount, but the torturer who came later, and Colonel Freiling left me, with this torturer, he did a real mess up of me. He pulled out quite a bit of my hair. and I saw the hair on the ground.
And Colonel Grayling himself, did he at any stage assault you or touch you?
Sorry, who?
Colonel Grayling.
Colonel Grayling, I would say he didn't assault me at all. I would also go further and say that whenever the assaults took place in his room, there were two assaults, one by Klein and the interrogating officer who came in after Klein was discharged. He conveniently, I would say, excused himself. He went out of the room. So he was not observing the torture either.
And the last question from me, were you at any stage yourself in a situation where you had your head covered with a balaclava or something?
No, a plastic bag.
A plastic bag?
Yeah.
For how long did that injure?
That was a good amount of time, but it was put on. I was hyperventilating. I couldn't see through the stuff too well because they often held, they tied something around the neck, my neck, and then they often held the plastic bag also, so sometimes the hands would be around, and they might have moved my head a little, and sometimes in a kind of a squatting position when they did this. It went on for a while, I would say, between 20 and 30 minutes, where occasionally they released the bag and put it back, or just, untied the bag from where it was tied to my neck, and then released it. But I was hyperventilating and I was all suffocating.
What kind of bag was it? Was it a transparent plastic bag or?
I think it was transparent, and I don't have a very clear memory of what kind of bag. It was a stiff bag, I would say. Perhaps not even a fully transparent bag.
Would it be the same as the bag that you saw the person you say could have been Mr. Timol? Is it a similar bag? That
no,
was
I
on the
thought
head of
when
that
I
person?
saw Timol being walked along in the passageway, dragged, and he was dragging his feet. I could see that. It was a dark bag, and I took it was a black wood.
A black
Hood.
or a black hood?
Yeah, I think
It was
it's a
not a
bag.
plastic bag, it was a
No,
black
I
hood.
don't think it was a plastic bag. But remember, I am some distance from, where
Yes.
he was, and I would say I would be probably maybe 8 to 10 meters away. I can't give you an exact measurement, but I was some distance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vami.
Thank you, Lordship. Your Lordship, while you were questioning Mr. Essop about whether he would recognize photographs, I'd like to draw to your attention that in the book authored by Imtiaz Kaji, Timol, The Quest for Justice, he managed to trace pictures of some of the police officers concerned, and they are published in this book. The only problem is that on most of the pictures, it includes the names of the police officers concerned. I can tell you that we have asked Captain Ben Nell to trace the police files of all these officers, and if he's able to trace those police files, there should be photographs in them. But I was wondering whether I shouldn't put up this book as an exhibit with these photographs, if I have no objections from my learned friends.
No objection. Mr. Zoras, what would be the evidential value of this? Look, I need the witness to identify the people who did it to the extent possible. But I want us to do it in such a way that it's not.
My Lord, can I ask that we hold back the exhibit eventually? Obviously I don't, but let's first take the other option, the possibility that in the files we'll have photographs without the names on, and then try to do that more properly with the witness. So
I think that's how it should be done, yes.
Yeah, let's first do that avenue and then see how far we can get with that, my Lord.
How long will that take? Can you find out from the captain how long will that take?
It will take some time. I think we will work on it, my lord, but I'm not sure that we'll do it in this sitting. As far as I'm speaking now to Captain Benel, we will not conclude with it in this sitting. If this witness is bringing back his original notes for the second sitting, we can try and do it for the second sitting, my lord. But as I'm speaking to him now, we're not going to conclude it in this week.
Mr. Esop, I know you are stationed in Britain. Would you be able to come back to help us with that?
I'd be very willing to do that.
The identity of those people that you can recall is very critical here.
Yes.
And so if you could help us with that, they'll make available the photographs to you, and it will be several photographs, and then you will have to pick up those. Evidence that they kept coming to you and so on.
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. If you know, the NPA team could send digitalized copies to my legal team,
yes,
they could transfer them to me even before I return. And
yeah,
what I could also do is send you know, just the photographs of people I could locate from the newspaper cuttings I have to my legal team.
Let's do it this way, in order to ensure that the evidence is correctly recorded. Give us an indication, when will you be coming back?
I'm returning sort of middle of next month to the UK. I have things to sort out, things to do there, and I hope to return a few days before the second hearing takes place.
Okay. On that occasion, then, hopefully we shall have got the pictures. I'd like the identification of the pictures to occur in terms of the processes. That would not lead to anything that will affect the quality of your evidence. The pictures will be put to you without the names. It will be several pictures, probably of some other people, and I hope my picture won't be there. And you'll then identify from those pictures the people who are interrogating you. And I want that identification to come out that way, so that then it must not be like they gave you a bunch of pictures which you just sifted through and then you selected people. It must be like an identity parade situation.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
we'll do it then when you come back. They shouldn't send you anything digital. We'll
Okay.
do it then when you come back, and to the best of your recollection.
Yes.
I know this thing happened many years ago.
Yes,
but
it's
to the
more than 46 years ago.
Yes, to the best of your recollection, if you could assist us. That's how I would prefer it done.
Taken note, my lord.
Yes, yes, please. And the other thing, Mr. Vani, I don't know whether you'll be able to help me with is records of this witness when he was hospitalized, medical records. I'd like to have a look at those medical records and the extent of the injuries and everything else, and the case he has been referring us to. I'm sure Mr. Bezos, if he still remembers, might be able to help us with that. The case that was brought before Justice Mago and the other judges, please let me have those records.
Yes.
I'd like to go through
My lord, on that score, if my memory serves me correctly, we did send one of the attorneys to the legal officers involved in that case.
Yes.
We have recovered the judgment in that matter,
Yes.
but to the best of my knowledge, we have not as yet covered the balance of the records, but we will keep looking.
Yeah, keep looking, and I know that the records of the court, High Court, Supreme Court then, are in the archives or something. See to what extent you can get from that file.
Will do, Your Lord.
Yes, we'll appreciate that. Do you have any questions for?
Yes, my Lord, I have about 8 or 9 questions,
Yes.
just to wrap up certain discrete issues. Mr. Essop, we are hoping to finalize your evidence this morning. After my questions, the prosecution will also have some questions for purposes of clarification, and then this afternoon will be the inspection in loco, and you will be required to accompany His Lordship and answer questions and point out. Your Lordship, just one issue of clarification. The Pretoria Academic Hospital, I should bring to your attention that the name actually did change again, and ironically, today it is named after another detainee who died in detention, Steve Biko.
Yes.
Just for the record.
It's Steve Biko Hospital, yes.
Exactly. Mr. Essop, yesterday His Lordship clarified your conditions of detention and you advised the court that you only ate once, aside from the sugar cubes, and apart from the times when you collapsed, you did not sleep. Were you at any time outside of the moments when you were writing your statement allowed to sit on a chair?
No.
Thank you.
Normally there wasn't a chair in the room, except in the time when I wrote the statement.
You've given evidence already on your citing of Ahmed Timol, and I'm not asking you to recount that evidence.
Ahmed Timol.
But I do want to hear from you why it was you thought that Timol happened to be in that passage when you caught a glimpse of him. Where was he heading to? Where was he heading from?
Right. He was moving away from the toilet area, I would say. So he was passing. I was on the north side, so he's going west. He's going along the passageway. So that's the door, that's the vault, and I'm looking through this way. That's the door. He is passing that way. That is south. That is north. So that is, sorry.
So he would be heading away from the
so
washroom.
that would be west, that would be east. He's moving away from the toilet area. He's going to the other side, not towards the stairwell side, to the other side.
Thank you. This is the same washroom where you were taken to a few times to relieve yourself and significantly, as you testified, to wash blood off you.
That's right. There was a washroom and there was also a urinal area.
Okay.
He was coming from that direction.
From that direction.
He was coming from that direction.
Yeah, from that direction.
Now, just as a follow-up to that, apart from that person you saw, which you say was Mr. Timol, did you see any other detainee during that time of your detention there?
No.
Somebody else?
No, none whatsoever. I also want to add that apart from not citing anyone, I heard no screams from the vault I was kept in. Meaning somebody else outside screaming or shouting or anything, or pleading or anything like that. I did not hear that from the vault I was kept in.
On that score, were you ever hit around the ears? Assaulted on
Yes, I have explained yesterday that I was, slapped very often, very hard slaps on my face, right? And at one stage I almost got blind, in my right eye because the slap was so hard.
Could it have affected your hearing in any way?
I don't think it affected my hearing.
Okay.
I don't think so. I did recover my sight. I did say that yesterday as well.
Right. Earlier today, in response from a question from the court, you mentioned that you had marks, visible marks on your body. Can I ask you, Mr. Essop, do you recall how long those marks were on your body?
You mean after I was taken away from John Foster Square?
Yes.
Well, the first few days, you know, when I spent time in the hospital, and I can't tell you exactly how many days I was there, the 2 hospitals, maybe 2 days, I can't tell you exactly. That you can always check according to the medical records and the court records that we've talked about so far. I do recollect gaining consciousness in the office come, hospital room, if you like, next to the hospital section at Pretoria prison, right? Pretoria Central Prison. I do recollect coming to consciousness, but I must tell you, when I came to consciousness, I was looking at myself, and there was a mirror in that office it was, as it was designed, I guess, with a big window, you know, looking into the courtyard. And I used to look at myself. I cannot say I saw too many visible marks, but I can say to you that I was lying prostrate on the bed. There was a mattress, you know, and sheets were provided, and there was blanket and so on. And I couldn't rise. I was still very immobile. I couldn't, there was an injury I felt to my limbs, right? And I couldn't rise, and I remember force myself to get up because they'd put a toilet pan, a portable one, a bucket, for me to use. I think sometimes they bought the hospital kind of like, little device where you sat on it and, you know, did your business, I guess, privately. It was an effort to try and like shift my body, you know, getting off the bed, like almost like falling, right? And remember, at night, I'm under guard with the windows open, with the lights on. That's how I stayed right through, with the lights on at night. Daytime, it's, you know, obviously it's very good light because it's a big window. And, you know, if I wanted to get up, I couldn't get up. Later, I should also say the injury, I think, on my legs was severe. Captain Sneerpel would come, he would bring in an African prisoner, a long-term prisoner I think he was, fairly strong guy, and Sneerpel would tell him to lift me out from the bed, and, you know, this was a little later, right? He'd ask the prisoner to lift me out and then hold me up. So I would put my shoulder on the prisoner, I put my hands on the prisoner's shoulder, and then drag me out of the office.
Mr. Eastop, sorry to interrupt you. Your affidavit actually does set out in some detail your slow process of recovery.
That's right.
And I would actually like to move onto other matters,
yes,
if I may. Thank you. And if we can return to John Vorster Square. You testified yesterday, and it's also in your affidavit, that towards the end you were in a state of near total collapse. You mentioned that you were in severe pain and agony to the point where death would have been some form of welcome relief. Suicide was out of the question because, as you said yesterday and this morning, you were never left alone. But I want to ask you, Mr. Aesop, before you lost consciousness, and there were these kinds of thoughts that were going around in your head, would you have had the physical capacity to commit suicide if the opportunity arose?
No. I don't think I would have had the physical capacity at all. First of all, I was never left alone, so I couldn't have moved too far without being watched and captured very quickly if I did try to run. The only place I could have jumped from a window, if you like, would be from the office, you know, where the vault was located, right? And I could have maybe tried to open a window there and tried to jump there, which was impossible. I couldn't do that because there was always an officer. And I was never in that office as such, and never on my own. So I don't think I was physically able to do that. Besides, I would say, I was getting more and more incapacitated. From a medical, physical point of view, if you like, I was suffering a lot.
But mentally, did that thought pass through your mind?
Well, let me explain to your Lordship. You know, for me, life has been one long process of survival. I don't see myself as a victim, ever, under any circumstances. I see myself as a survivor. I see myself as protesting right through. That whoever even tries to kill me, I would try to, prevent that happening. Mentally, I don't have any disposition to ever contemplate, suicide. I don't know where I got this, but I did read a lot about, great leaders, like, say, for example, Mahatma Gandhi, people who engage in civil disobedience, Martin Luther King. I know of people like that. I even knew then much about people like that. There were people who protested under any circumstances. People like Gandhi, right, would go on a hunger fast, almost to the point of death, but he could control it. He knew how to control his body. I admired the man enormously. My great heroes outside South Africa are people like that. Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, people like that, right? I have a strong will to live. I know what suicide means from a medical point of view, right? From a psychological point of view. I did, to some extent, half my degree in medicine. I did a degree in psychology, right? I read a lot on suicide. I've read books when I did developmental psychology on death and dying, a famous book by an American psychologist, Kubler-Ross.
Yes, I'm trying to get you back to the time when you were in detention.
Yes.
When you were being interrogated.
Yes.
The question is, at that time, with all these pressures around you, did the thought of taking your own life come to you?
No.
At that time?
No. Let me put it this way. When I was, dangled from the stairwell by the two security officers who were, interrogating me and then also torturing me, when they dangled my body down and showing me 10 floors down and telling me that I could fall 10 down and have a good look, that's the time. Look, I must tell you, I did not contemplate suicide, which is different from saying that if they drop me, well, they've done it. In other words, somebody killed me, not me taking my life.
In other words, you are submitting to the possible eventual
I would,
end of
yes,
life.
if death comes at any moment, I have to take it, whether it's a natural death or an unnatural death. If somebody wants to kill somebody today, and that happens, anywhere, you cannot control that. I would see this as something they did, as a threat to kill me, and as something they could even have done to literally kill me.
Now, during your underground work with Mr. Timol, did you come across any documents or any pamphlets that suggested to members of the South African Communist Party that in event they are captured, they should consider suicide as one of the options? Or did you at any stage have a discussion around something like that from him? Hear something like that from him? From Mr. Timol?
Mr. Timol.
Yes.
Well, first of all, I didn't come across any document from the South African Communist Party or from the ANC. I personally didn't come across that kind of information in any of the documents. And the documents that Timol and I circulated did not carry that kind of information. There was, the Nkululeko Communist Party document that Timol and I circulated was issue 1. There was an issue 2 which was in February 1972, which is after Ahmed Timol's death, and he would never have been responsible for that. Let me also just comment on this. we did talk about, we're doing this very dangerous work. We did talk about that. We did talk about should something happen, what do we do? Well, we didn't dwell too much on it. We just felt we'll have to go through it. At the time of arrest, when we were sitting in Newlands police station, we did talk very quickly about that, and I remember I told him very emphatically, Ahmed, we're going to go through this. We're going to go through this. We'll come out of this. And he looked at me. He was silent, and he sort of like, nodded. But he was, I don't want to use the dirty language, but he was shit scared, right? He was really scared, right? And I looked at him and I said, no, Ahmed, we'll pull through this. We'll pull through this. And he sort of said, yeah, something along those lines. I don't think, can I also maybe just develop this point a little further in terms of giving you some kind of profile of Ahmed, a personality profile. Ahmed was not somebody who ever wanted to die. Not somebody, he loved life, right? If you look at even the political work he did and I did, both of us, when you go into that kind of work, look, let me explain to you. Somebody like, we were not of that caliber of like, say, Nelson Mandela or Brown Fisher. But people of that caliber, when they undertake work, whether it's legal or illegal, they have an understanding of a political trajectory of their life. They know where they will be heading. They know they would be arrested. They would even anticipate that something awful could happen once they are arrested. Well, we had that anticipation. We had that same, idea of the political trajectory we would go through. We would go through it. And I would like to comment on the fact that when we were working, we knew that, something could happen. And I personally felt that, whatever happened, once you get into this kind of stuff, this kind of political work, you will be inevitably at some point, taken in. You could expect that, but you had to carry on. Look, I would also go to as far as to say, if we had at any stage, been aware of being like, watched and being captured, we would have both tried to flee. We were not that kind of people who would be sitting ducks, if you like, right? I would say, we were brave people, like so many others in this country, who would defy the authorities. We would not want them to capture us. We would not want them to kill us. We loved life. We enjoyed life. Ahmed and I were, people who, Ahmed, if you look at some of his pictures, he's a man who smiles. He had a natural smile on his face. I spoke to his girlfriend in the UK. I had a long interview with her, right? I tape recorded the whole interview. I've made a transcript of it, and we talked many times because we are good friends, right? Ruth Longoni, and she never had the impression either that Ahmed was suicidal ever, no matter what he did. She knew to some extent of his political involvement with the banned organizations in exile. She knew that, but she never, and they loved life. Ahmed was like me, and that is in one respect why we were such great friends. We enjoyed life. We went out, we did all sorts of things, we ate out, we entertained ourselves. We were not inclined in any way. We were not. I don't remember Ahmed ever telling me that he had instructions that, look, if you're in a difficult situation, or you had to give your friends away, you had to give their names away, or they were torturing you to a point where you couldn't take this torture any longer, then do this. Or that if there were any suggestion that, look, you could have this little drug or something like that, because that sort of thing also happened in different parts of the world. Have this little drug always with you, and then just take it if you think it's too difficult for you to go through the whole experience. We never talked about that. I don't think he had any instructions that said. I don't think he even bothered about it. We just had this one idea. Yes. We were doing this work.
Now, the person who's identified or is thought to be the handler of Mr. Timol in the SACP, did you know who it was? The person Mr. Timol was communicating to for the underground work.
Yes.
You know the person You're not
I don't know
person.
the person. Well, let me explain to you. There's two things here. The nom de plume that was used in his correspondence was Stephanie. So he wrote to Stephanie, and this Stephanie replied to him.
Okay.
Almost all the correspondence was with Stephanie, right? And some of that stuff is available, the correspondence. Now, who was the Stephanie? It was alleged that this Stephanie was Stephanie Kemp, who I think she was still married to, the advocate L.B. Sachs, right?
But then at that time, you didn't know.
No. I must tell you, I had no knowledge of the correspondence. That was Ahmed's work.
Okay.
But in my trial, the correspondence was brought out, and in Ahmed's inquest, I think the correspondence was also brought out. I did not know of the correspondence, but I established over the years who Stephanie was, and if the court wants to hear, I can tell you what the whole process was.
No. I just want to know your state of mind as at that time. What you knew, what you did not know. At that time, at the time of Mr. Timol's death. I know there's a lot of things that came out subsequent thereto, but my interest is at the time when you were working underground with Mr. Timol, and whether you knew whether there was this Mr. or Miss X whose name might have caused Mr. Timol.
Okay, that's, yes.
That's what I'm asking about.
So that's that's different from Stephanie, right?
Yes.
Stephanie was a person he communicated with abroad.
Yes.
Mr. X, can I give an account of Mr. X then?
Is it information you had at the time you were detained?
Not at the time when I was interrogated. It's information I got subsequent to my release from detention when I was brought to court for trial.
Yes. Then in that case, all I want to know is that did such a person exist?
Right.
Mr. X.
The story runs like this.
Well, you don't give me the details of him, whoever he was. I just want to know if there was such a person who existed.
Right. My view is that there was no Mr. X. It's an absolute fiction.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Right, you may proceed, Mr.
Thank you.
Anton.
Your Lordship, just to let you know in advance that we will be submitting a statement from Stephanie Kemp and calling her in the second sitting.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Aesop, we were talking about your physical capacity to do things. And you have mentioned that that your physical capacity was diminished towards the end of your detention, and your state. I think you have described it, but can you just confirm it one last time that when you left John Vorster Square, and presumably for some period before departure, what state were you in?
I was in a state of near death. I would say I was in a sort of a coma. I didn't have very much consciousness. A little before that, coming to that, I had felt like life was going out of me. I think sometimes when people become very ill, they're aware that life is going out of them. And I felt like life was just draining out of me. And this was not only a psychological feeling, but it was physiological. It was to do with my body functions. I just felt like I was going. And at any time I was going.
Thank you. You've testified that you were never left alone. Can I ask you if you were ever left in the company of what might be termed administrative staff, support staff, individuals who might have been making the coffee?
In my case, I would say no. I think all the people who interrogated me, with the exception of Klein and Thinnies, who were ordinary South African police. And Klein obviously assaulted me, I had mentioned that. All the interrogating officers, if you're talking of interrogation as such, which is focused on our political underground work, I don't remember a single person who I could call, as a clerk or a secretary or somebody in administration. I would say all the officers were security officers of various ranks. I cannot say there was even a single person. I may not even know their names, but I felt they had a certain way of, a certain behavior, a certain code of conduct amongst themselves. They weren't, I suppose, people who know South African police as such, and they know security police also as such, I think the behaviors of the two categories of police are different.
Thank you. And while we were talking about coffee, were you ever offered coffee or tea?
No, I've mentioned the thing about food, no. I told you we brought in once, some food that didn't look very nice at all. It was already cold.
But no, certainly no coffee or tea.
There was no coffee, there was no tea, nothing.
Thank you. If we can now move to your recovery and your period at Pretoria Central Prison. I don't want to dwell for too long on this because it was post John Vorster Square and also post the death of Timol. But in your affidavit, you do allege that you sustained certain further abuse.
Yes.
Can you briefly describe that?
Okay. I was in Pretoria Central Hospital in that room next to the medical section, which was an office converted into a bedroom for me especially, and still lying in bed most of the day, occasionally rising, but so this would be probably early December. I cannot give you a date, right? I'd lost count, but I could sort of more or less, establish like the month and, days and so on. And according to the routine of prison, I could make out this was a weekend or this was a weekday, right? I could make that out. Captain Sneerpel was the man in charge of me at the prison. He brought in 3 or 4 people. One of these was a man who wore a white coat, and he appeared to look like a doctor, right? I wouldn't say he was a doctor.
Now, when you say Captain, who's Keppers?
Sneerpel.
Sneerpel.
S-N-Y-P-E-L.
Is he a captain
in the prison?
In the
he's
prison.
not security or he's not police.
In the prison.
In the prison.
Okay.
He's a trusted captain with whom I think he had close cooperation with the security police. He's a very trusted prison officer. So they brought in these 3 or 4 men, Sneerpel, and he told me, he introduced them in a way, not by name, said they've come to help you, they just want to look at you and talk to you. Obviously I can't do anything about this, right? They then asked me, look, I think there was a chair, they said, sit down and they're going to help you. And then he went out, and the men who were there, the 2 guys helped me. The guy with the white coat, he then took out, he brought a case, more or less looking like a doctor's medical case, right? He took out a case and he had a syringe inside. And he took this out, and I think it was already preloaded, or he might have loaded it then, I can't be exactly sure. And they said they're going to calm me down, and then we can have a nice talk. They say I'm, when they are maybe a bit frightened or nervous, and this will help me to relax. Anyway, the syringe was put into my left arm. I had a natural tendency, if syringes were used, to push out my left arm, right? Even now, even today I do that with doctors. So sort of had my arm out. I remember, I can't say anything about this. This is what they want to do. So I actually, being a medical student, I said, what you're putting into my body, what is that stuff? What is in your syringe? He says, no, it'll help you to talk. It'll calm you. Well, there is a kind of a shorthand for this kind of thing, the talking drug, right? And there is a pharmacological name for that drug. On the other hand, I don't know whether it was LSD. I wouldn't be able to establish that. But this drug was shoved into my arm, the needle was pushed in, and very quickly I just went I felt very high. I sort of like floated in the air. I felt like, I was on another planet almost. I felt, a great calmness, right? I was almost in a kind of a transcendental existence, in another plane of living, if you like. And so I don't know what the drug was, whether it was LSD or some kind of what they call truth or talking drugs, right? And I should also mention that I did see the syringe. It was a relatively large syringe, and it was loaded. I would say the dose was fairly large, and I really went high in my mind. I really went high. And I would say that perhaps even the dose was large enough even to have killed me. I know people on LSD trips, do die. So anyway, I did feel very relaxed. I was then asked questions. I remember some of the questions. It was all about, who we knew and etc. And because I was hallucinated, and I was like feeling like very, very, relaxed and like living on another plane, if you like, of existence, I gave it a go of trying to do my best at singing, which I just normally can't do, right? And I sang something, right? And I felt, there's something happening now, right? But that's what my memory is.
Thank you, Mr. Esop. Just on that incident, this wasn't your normal medication? Were you taking something?
I was a physically fit person. I was under no medical treatment of any sort. And exceptionally, I would say, healthy person. I was already into health foods.
But you had been taking medication previously?
I never took any medication.
No, for purposes of recovery, because according to your statement, you had stopped taking the medication by that time.
Medication?
Well, let me see if I can find it.
Yes, can I just look at it?
Let's see if we can find it.
Something I took because I was ill or something.
Just to put it in context, at the time of your arrest, were you taking any medication for any kind of ailment?
No, I had no medical condition. I was a perfectly healthy person. I was never taking any medication whatsoever.
So any medication that might have been administered to you subsequent thereto came out of your experience in the detention?
Yeah, if something was given to me. I did request at times, headache tablets in the prison.
Yes, and to be fair to you, that's precisely what you say in your affidavit, that at that point when you received the injection, you were no longer receiving any medication, not even headache tablets.
Yes, I did request headache tablets. Occasionally, I did feel a headache. I don't know whether that was due to those terrible slaps and all the falls I had and knocks on the head I had. I don't know whether it was due to it, but I did have headaches, okay. And occasionally I did ask for headache tablets.
Thank you.
That was all the medication I would say I had.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to another issue we need to clear up. Yesterday you testified, and it's also in your statement, that after you had provided your statement, the police were dissatisfied, felt that you hadn't given enough. And you testified that your torture after that was particularly ferocious. Now, also in your statement, you say that you have seen Timol's statement, the statement that he made to the police, and in your view, which is in your affidavit, you said the police would have wanted more. We don't have time for a close analysis of Ahmed Timol's statement, but can you briefly indicate to the court, with maybe just one or two examples, why you are of the view that the police would have wanted more.
From Ahmed Timol.
Yes.
Right. The kind of life he led in London, the people he met, and the political people in particular, I think they wanted to know more about that. There's nothing of that in the statement except some names and about how the cell structure, which he was supposed to set up in South Africa, worked in terms of contacting people in London. There's nothing in his statement about the people who mentored him in London. So that's missing, right? So if you look at it like, let me put it this way. I think Ahmed received a strong political education in London, right? Living with a range of people who were politically minded like him. And also Ruth Longoni, his girlfriend, told me Sunday mornings was a day when he went to what were almost like formal political classes. Various people ran this, and there was Jack Hodgson who also ran this, right? He would be going on a Sunday morning. So there's nothing of that in his statement that he was, the other thing is he did receive training in working with secret ink, if you like, which is how he conducted his correspondence with Stephanie. So, right, and he had training for that. He doesn't mention, all of that. The last thing I would say, which is quite, in a way, important, he did go to Moscow. Now, I don't know how he went to Moscow, because he held, as far as I know, and now, and even then, from what I knew, a South African passport. But, and I suppose if you went to Moscow, if your passport was stamped, it might be a bit of a big question mark when you return to South Africa. So I don't know, but he did go to Moscow. He went to the, Marxist-Leninist Institute there in Moscow. It was the shorthand for that was party school. There were various people who were there. Our ex-president, Mr. Thabo Mbeki, was Ahmed's contemporary who went to the same place, party school.
Okay, so there's
and
certainly...
he has no mention of that in his statement.
Thank you, Mr. Essop. Mr. Essop, I have two more questions for you, and then thereafter I want to put, just for the sake of completeness, the documents that you were referring to. Second last question. The police version is that the pre-injury, the pre-death injuries on Timol's body that could not be ascribed to the fall were probably attributed to a brawl that Timol was involved in before his detention. You've testified that you were with him prior to the arrest, and in fact at the arrest, and that you socialized with him on a regular basis. In fact, you were close friends with him. Did you hear of such a brawl or know of such a brawl?
Right, on the night of the arrest, there was no brawl. There was no encounter with anyone who tried to threaten us or attack us or anything. None whatsoever. We had been to various places. We were in Fordsburg in the early part of the evening. We then went to Nuclear. No brawl there. They were visiting, each time we were visiting a friend, right? In Fordsburg, a friend, another friend in Nuclear, and then we went to Bosman Hotel, and no brawl there.
And prior to that evening,
did
you raise a brawl, or did you perhaps see visible signs of...
No. When we left, we were together from around 6 o'clock, and we were arrested at 11 o'clock. So between 6 and 11, I would say, I observed nothing. And if he had any kind of marks, if he looked disheveled too, he usually appeared neat in his dress, right? And I would have probably asked him, what's happened to you? Or if he looked, a bit like not in a good state. And there was nothing like that.
And in the days preceding, there was no news or discussion of a brawl?
No, not at all. Not at
Thank
all.
you.
The other last point I'll make about the story about the brawl, there are people who, who are of a certain temperament and who can quickly get into a brawl and who are perhaps very argumentative and who are very quick with their fists and, whatever, right? Ahmed was never of that type. He was a mild, soft character, very nice personality, very friendly, even to people who might have been hostile to him. If somebody swore to him, he's not the one who would turn the other cheek, but he would, appropriately handle the situation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Your Lordship, I don't know when you want to take the tea break.
It's now 11:15.
11:15, okay.
Yes.
So I still have a few more minutes. I think there's a good chance I can conclude with this witness before tea.
No, you'll conclude when we come back.
Oh, it's 11:15 already. I beg your
Yes,
pardon.
we'll conclude. Your junior is supposed to draw that to your attention. We are adjourned until 11:30.
So now, shut off the 50 and not to concentrate on the others. In fact, he did meet brother Henry. And I'm going to he touched on both of them, but I think we need to actually hand them up to him, as well as this one. Were you able to get a sense of what I was saying? Luckily, I think he's coming back. Is it possible that we can squeeze this page so that everything, the whole paragraph is on it? I think I need to read it out. Hand up this document. It's called Frelimo
Yes, Mr. Esop, you're still under oath.
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Vani, you may proceed.
Thank you, Lordship. Mr. Esop, the police version put up what they might have referred to as a certain tipping point when Timol was in room 1026. And this morning, His Lordship asked you about Mr. X, who suddenly arrived and provided information which, according to the police, was somewhat explosive in nature. So dramatic and so damning that, according to the police, this was the tipping point which led Timol to ultimately commit suicide by diving through the window. And I want to put the names that the police allegedly told Timol. It appears that these three names were individuals from abroad: the twin brothers Quinton and Henry Jacobson, and a third man by the name of Martin Cohen. I'd like to ask you whether you are familiar with those names, and if so, in what circumstance. If you had occasion to meet any of them, please tell the court. And then whether the circumstances as you are familiar with would have warranted that kind of response from Timol.
Okay. I'm familiar with two of the names: Quinton Jacobson and his twin brother, Henry Jacobson. This familiarity is to do with, before my detention, if you like, right? This is not to do with now. At the time, I don't think the name Martin Cohen, the third person mentioned, any bells. Might have put him somewhere. How did we come to know, how did I come to know, say, one of the Jacobsons at least? Did we ever visit Quinton Jacobson's studio in Johannesburg, which was on Pritchard Street, not far from the High Court here? And did Ahmed ever go to the studio himself? But let me give you the story. We had a friend by the name of Ibrahim Laher, spelled with an E, Ibrahim Laher. He came from a wealthy family, and his father was very close to, in friendship with my mother. And he frequented our house quite a lot, and he was also a relative. So Ibrahim was a relative. Ibrahim was a kind of a very avant-garde type, bohemian type, loved the free lifestyle, had moved around in the world. He'd studied even in Pakistan in one of the, Ivy League, high schools, getting a kind of an A-level qualification. And he was a smooth operator, as somebody would say, right? And through him, I met a number of people too. He knew Ahmed and I well. He was, I would say, more my friend than Ahmed's. But when Ahmed came back from England, we occasionally went out with him too, right? And we used to go to his house. His father had bought him a house, a car, everything, wealthy family. And they lived in Roodepoort. And so we would be visiting him. One day Ibrahim says, look, I've met these wonderful guys. They're photographers, and they've got a lovely studio, right? And why don't we go there? So I said, fine, let's go there. It'd be nice. And I'm also that kind of person. I like to explore, and I'm, sort of a very free-minded person too. Just like Ibrahim Laher and Ahmed Timol. We said, let's go, we could find out what this whole thing is about. And I was doing my own photography, and Ahmed and I were involved now for doing photographic work too. We've got the equipment, and we thought we might learn a trick or two and come to know something to do with professional photography. I mean, I was an amateur photographer, obviously, right? So Ibrahim takes us in his car. We park it somewhere, and we, get off and go to the studio. He was familiar with the studio. So we go up and there, and Henry was there and meets us, and very nice, warm personality, right? Lovely guy. And still remember the face, nice young face. Quentin wasn't there. Quentin wasn't there. And there were some other people there, but we had a very brief introduction, and I can't remember the names. They had the fairly big studio. It was a ground floor studio. They used it as the housing accommodation too. It was like a lodge, and a lot of people came there. They had people who all kinds of interesting people. One of my medical student friends in the same classroom as I, Ian Hill, used to go there as well. Right, and he was a friend, a fellow student with me.
To the best of your knowledge, Henry and Quentin Jacobson, were they in the underground?
Okay, so Ibrahim never told us anything about Quentin being politically involved in anything whatsoever. Ibrahim never told us that Henry or anyone else at the studio were doing any kind of political work. Okay, now, so we go there, and Ibrahim at some point leaves the country, right? Ibrahim was being forced by, in a way, his parents and his family to get married, and he didn't want to do that at that stage, and wanted to have still his free lifestyle and etc. And so decided to leave, but he was a big spender, right? And he didn't have enough money, and I think he took some money from Quentin Jacobson in particular, right? And so he probably left an IOU with Quentin Jacobson, and he might have said something to Quentin Jacobson, or maybe wrote in the IOU that, look, you can, I've got a good friend, Ahmed, he works at a school, that you could perhaps retrieve the money later, or perhaps I'll give the money to you. I don't really know the story. But Ibrahim went off, and I was, close to him, and I helped him, just to, for a few days to talk with him, and we went even shopping a few days before, etc. And so Ibrahim left the country. He never returned. He wrote a letter, which was then presented in court, I think in the Quentin Jacobson trial, and I'm not too sure it was presented in my trial, but it was around, and there was a newspaper article which splashed this paper letter, and this Ibrahim Lahab, because he'd been traveling around the world, he was also called International. So there was this big splash in the paper that International had written this letter to Ahmed Timol that you must not go to the studio. He doesn't trust Quentin and Henry, and tell Salim not to see Henry again. Something along those lines, right? Ahmed gets this letter. He comes to me and he says, look, Ibrahim's written this letter. Remember, Ibrahim's friendship with Ahmed is not as deep as mine. He says Ibrahim has written this letter to him, and he doesn't understand why it's written, but he doesn't know anything about Jacobson. Why is he writing this? And besides, what does Ibrahim know about us? I said, well, I've never spoken to him about anything. He says, well, he hasn't spoken to him either about anything. Now, let me put it this way. Ibrahim is a kind of a, very mobile character, makes friendships easily, extremely handsome guy, tall, right, looks like a film star, right, dresses extremely well, right, and he would go to London and meet all kinds of people, and like a lot of people from South Africa, they want to be smart, and they go to the ANC office, right? He would visit the ANC office, and he would still try and return to South Africa, right? Anyway, after he wrote this letter, he never returned because Quentin Jacobson was arrested around the 8th, I think, of November, 7th, 8th of November. According to the police records, they kept surveillance of his place, right? And they had, you know, been watching him. And at the time of his arrest, it was claimed that the drug squad, not the security police, were investigating him. Now, Henry Jacobson was a drug addict, right? From what Jacobson later wrote in a book, right, they did use drugs, and he probably had some drugs in the place. And I think when they investigated, they did find some drugs. This is nothing to do with Ahmed Timol and I. Ahmed never met, as far as I know, Quentin Jacobson, right? Now, I should add that when Mr. X was presented or the X story was, Mr. X story was presented, you know, in court, in the inquest about why Ahmed took his life, that he was absolutely shocked. Well, Ahmed could have not known about Quentin Jacobson whatsoever, and even if he had, been to the studio, I mean, he would not be threatened by that information. If I was ever asked, I was, by the way, never asked about Quentin Jacobson. My assumption about that letter is that they had searched Ahmed Timol's house or his school cupboard, and they found a letter somewhere. So it was very much later they found a letter. And after they, in my view, killed Ahmed Timol, they were trying to work out a story which would stand up as reasonable from the security police point of view, that this was shocking information, that here Jacobson was a co-conspirator with Ahmed Timol. He was charged with trying to undertake sabotage in South Africa.
Sorry to interrupt. You mentioned that there wasn't a political association as such, or really much of an association, but you did mention an IOU.
Yes.
What happened to that IOU?
Right. Now, I don't know what happened to the IOU. I don't remember Ahmed telling me about the IOU, right? But Quentin Jacobson, after he was released, on the very day of the release, the British Council also had inquired from the South African authorities about Quentin Jacobson and tried to protect him, right? He was a professional photographer, by the way, right? And when we went to the studio, I seen some of the work and admired it. So the IOU, well, Ahmed never told me about it. Ibrahim never told me about it. Ibrahim did tell me that Quentin Jacobson was giving his fare money for the plane. He did tell me that he was borrowing money from him, right? So presumably, the money was owed to Quentin Jacobson. Quentin Jacobson and his brother, I would say, would have had a reasonably good amount of money, right? Now, they did commercial photography. In his book, this is where I get the information later, he claims that he wanted to make good of the IOU and basically try to find out where this Ahmed Timol was. He didn't know Ahmed Timol. He makes plain of that in his book. He goes, apparently, according to the book he wrote, solitary in Johannesburg. He goes to the Rudiput school where Ahmed was teaching. He had come to know this. And he met an Ahmed. And he spoke to him, and he realized that this wasn't the Ahmed he wanted. Obviously, that indicates he didn't know Ahmed Timol at all. Now, so then he asked somebody, or that person, that, look, where is this Ahmed Timol he wants to see? Eventually, he does find Ahmed Timol, according to him. This is before our arrest, and told him about the IOU, but he doesn't take it further in his book either, right? And Ahmed never raised this with me, and as far as I could see when I read the book, well, he wrote the book, and there's a lot of stuff about him being a hero and trying to embellish the story about, you know, what he did in South Africa.
Thank you, Mr. Isap. I appreciate that. Mr. Isap, my final inquiry deals with two documents that came before the original inquest court. I wish to put these documents before you and ask you certain questions. My Lord, with the leave of the court, I wish to put up a document which is Exhibit YY, and that is from Volume B,
Volume B.
which would be, I suppose, your second lever arch file. I may as well hand up both documents at the same time to save a bit of time. The second document is the one that has been referred to earlier, in Nkululeko Freedom, a newsletter dated February of 1972. And that, my Lord, is part of Volume C. I think we gave it the exhibit number C1. Thank you. That goes to the witness. Now, there were a handful of documents, two others to be precise, that were exhibits in the original inquest. I won't be asking you to look at those because those do not speak of suicide. Let's start with the document titled Frelimo Memorandum. And as you might be aware, Frelimo was a Mozambican-based organization in those days, fighting for the liberation of Mozambique. And
which one is it now?
so that's Exhibit YY in Volume B.
Yes.
If you look on the index of Volume B, it's in fact the very last document, number 50. And it would
Well,
be
mine are not numbered, or the number is not that very legible. Is it this interrogation and the statute notified?
yes, it is in fact that document.
Yes, it's
It's at page 161 of Volume B.
yeah.
You have it, Your Lordship?
Yeah, I have it, but the copy is not
And,
that very legible. But I'll do
In
my
fact,
best.
unfortunately,
Yes.
the copy is very bad, and we were actually struggling to read it.
Yeah. Just one minute. Keep these things moving. Yes, and this. Yes, you proceed.
Thank you, Lordship. Firstly, Mr. Esop, during those days, did you ever come across this document titled Frelimo Memorandum?
Not at all.
Not at all, okay. Can I direct your attention to the very last paragraph? I think it's on page 3. Because there is a mention in somewhat garbled language to suicide. And perhaps I'll read that language. Before they return, they must fully understand the nature of the contest which they will have to carry on with their interrogators should they be pulled in, and how it should be carried on, possibly to a final conclusion, suicide, but certainly to such aggressive methods of counter-attack as, and sadly that word is not legible, strikes, passive resistance, etc.
I think that the word which is not legible is hunger strikes.
Hunger strikes.
Where
Right.
are you reading from?
So
Page 3, you say.
it is page 3 of the Frelimo memorandum, and it's the last paragraph, Your Lordship.
Oh, the very last paragraph.
Yeah.
The one that's not numbered.
And in fact, the very last line, the very last sentence.
Yes.
So this document was put up as an exhibit in the original inquest. And there seems to be a suggestion that suicide be used. Was this something, did such an instruction or a suggestion as described here ever come to your attention?
No. This document doesn't make sense to me. I'd never read anything of this sort before. Certainly not at the time of our underground work. Remember, I am an academic, and I would have researched things like this later. So that's a different story, right? But this document, I would say, makes absolutely no sense to me in terms of what I and Ahmed were doing at that time. And besides, let me also say, Ahmed never raised this kind of document with me, right? He didn't even talk too much about Frelimo, by the way, or that he had a Frelimo document. Let's look at it. Look at how they're conducting their armed struggle, if you like, right, in Mozambique. And no, not at all. Makes no sense to me, this document.
And it also seems a bit odd that a Frelimo document is not in the language that would have been used in Mozambique.
Well, I have to read the whole document. I did read a lot of Frelimo. I also lived in Mozambique after my escape from South Africa.
Yes.
And I did read a lot of Frelimo documents. I even met some Frelimo people, right? And we were also helped in Frelimo, by Frelimo when we were in, the ANC was generally being helped in Mozambique by Frelimo, yes. Right? But if you're talking of the authenticity of this document, look, I've got to read this carefully, but you know, let me put it this way. You know, when it comes to security operations in any country, you know, the police, security police in any country, whether it's Mozambique or, you know, South Africa or anywhere else, they would also put out false information, misinformation. It was part of their propaganda. So I wouldn't be able to confirm anything. I'm not an expert to confirm anything about this.
Thank you. And then finally, the other document that is before you, that is titled Inkululeko Freedom, February 1972, number 2. Now,
what is that, volume C?
Sorry, that's volume C, and that would be Annex C1, which in fact it would be the last document in volume C.
What page is that now? I see volume C has been numbered.
Yeah.
Would you know which page?
Well, we only added this. Hold on. What is the? I think it is in the My Lord, I'm advised that it's page 155.
155.
Yeah.
Well, volume C, my volume C seems to end with 154. Then it might be something that you need to hand in.
I think we might have the wrong volume.
I mean, look, if I might help, we
Yes.
added it while volume C was already bound, so it was an annexure to volume C, so it won't be in volume C. It was added afterwards. It was a statement by Victor afterwards. But Inkululeko is part of Captain Ben Nell's statement.
Yes, then the papers will have to be updated.
Yes.
Papers
My Lord, I wonder whether I can hand you up a copy just so that we can
yes,
save time.
please.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Actually, you can hand that copy up, but that's in Inkululeko 1, and this is in Inkululeko 2.
There are 2 documents.
I want you to just give that to me. Okay. My Lord, it's page 15 of volume C for the record.
Page 15.
15, 1,
Oh,
5.
it appears in page 15 of volume C. That is number 2.
That's
The paper number 2. So number 1 is this one. Right, go ahead.
I've given copies of both editions of Nkululeko Freedom,
Yeah.
number 1 and number 2. Of interest to us is number 2. For the record, Mr.
I don't think so. The document was mainly focusing on the South African Communist Party and its 50 years of history in South Africa.
Can I refer you now to Nkululeko Freedom, February 1972, 72, number 2.
Okay.
Now, this document was not part of the formal exhibit list of the original inquest, but we know from the finding of Magistrate de Villiers that he used it as part of his reasoning to conclude that Timol had committed suicide. And if I can refer you to the very last paragraph, and that would be on page 7, and my lord, that would be page 21 of the volume C. In fact, I beg your pardon, Mr. Esop, it's the third last paragraph.
Okay.
And you will note that in the last line of the third paragraph is the sentence, rather commit suicide than to betray the organization.
What is this now? Can you take me from where it says stands firm? Those words that are in bold. You say page 21.
It's page 21 of the record and page 7 of the document.
Right. Now it says stands firm. Where are you in relation to that?
So I'm at the third last paragraph, which starts with the words, harass your enemy by going on hunger strikes. I want to quote in particular the last line of that paragraph.
Okay.
And the last line of that paragraph, my lord, reads, rather commit suicide than to betray the organization. It's worth noticing, my lord, the last paragraph as well, because in that paragraph specific names are mentioned, individuals who have been fighting with us since the days of Rivonia, and those names include Roly Arenstein, Vernon Barange, Izzy Maisels, H.D. Naidu, George Bezos, Sogot, and others. We'll deal with that paragraph in the evidence of George Bezos. But I'd like to deal just with a few matters that arise from this document with you, Mr. Esop. What do you know about this document?
Well, I had never cited this document at the time when we were operating and even after we were arrested. The document is dated February 1972. We were arrested a good few months after that. Before that, good few months. So in other words, this is not a document that Ahmed would have had, nor is a document that I would have ever read anyway. So from that point of view, the document is something totally unfamiliar to me, right? And if we read the paragraphs you have read, do they make sense to me? Would they make sense to another political activist, and in particular an underground operative in South Africa? Well, maybe, who knows, right? Let me put it this way. Look, organizations like the ANC or the South African Communist Party or Frelimo would write stuff like this maybe, about how to stand up or protect yourself, in an interrogation. The encounter you might have with the security officers, with, if you like, Gestapos anywhere in the world, right? People would write things. A lot of the stuff is very common sense stuff, by the way, right? You read this. There's no great sophisticated stuff here about how you should actually defend yourself. Let me also say, from another point of view, from a psychological point of view, when you are detained, you don't think of what instructions you might have been given, verbally or in writing by anyone. You don't think of that. You're standing there on your 2 feet. You're confronting murderous people, right? And you respond spontaneously, according to your instincts, your gut level responses. You respond. And you may have an orientation to life, which comes into play. If you think you're a survivor, you might respond with like, well, I'll face this, I'll go through it. That's what I did, right? I would say Ahmed was the same kind of survivor. He would have stood up, right? Yes, you would say, this kind of, whatever they do to you, all the nasty work they do on you, right? You could, when you actually facing that time when they absolutely murderous, right? You could say, look, don't hit me, please, or I beg of you, please. You plead. I pleaded. I said, look, I've had enough. Please, don't hit me. Just write anything you want and I'll sign it, right? I do know people who broke down in torture, but this kind of stuff. Look, organizations may write this, and it also depends on the level of understanding of interrogation and torture that the writers of pieces like this, the level of education, the level of understanding of what happens. This is a kind of a thing which is so common sense. I mean, I wouldn't even take it seriously. And if it is misinformation, for example, it could be a fabricated document. Who knows? I don't know. Like, this document doesn't make sense to me.
Mr. Essop,
let me just ask one thing to clarify. You testified, Mr. Essop, that issue number one was typed by Mr. Timol. Am I correct?
That's right.
And you have read
That's what I understood it.
You understood?
Yeah.
You know that for sure that.
Yeah, I read the document. Okay. Unkululeku 1. I read it.
And do you know if he was typing it on instructions of anyone?
From the Communist Party.
Yes.
He was acting under instructions.
To type this one.
To type the document, to basically distribute it, and basically also remember, let me just make this point very, very clearly. The South African Communist Party, and to a large extent also the African National Congress, at the time of our underground work, were almost non-existent. They didn't have a very big presence.
Yes,
right?
You are familiar with it. I just want to get this point so that I shouldn't lose it.
Yeah.
Before you elaborate, you'll have sufficient time to elaborate
Yeah.
later. Now, number two, this issue number two, you say you know nothing about
No,
it.
not at all.
You have never seen it.
I've never cited it.
And to your knowledge, it could not have been typed by Mr. Timol.
No, Ahmed was dead.
Was the modus operandi that the issues, the documents issued in this sequence, typed by different people, or only Mr. Timol was authorized to issue
No,
this
there were a
license?
number of propaganda units established by the ANC and the Communist Party in South Africa. They had propaganda units in different parts of South Africa.
And you are certain that Mr. Timol did not type this one?
He did not type this. Somebody, another political operative, maybe in Cape Town, could have typed this.
No, thank you. That is all I needed from my side concerning these documents.
My Lord, in fact, you posed my final question, so that,
Yes.
that then concludes the evidence in chief.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pretorius?
Thank you, my Lord. While we're on this subject, I just want to ask you, do you know what happened to Ahmed Timol's typewriter?
Apparently, I think something like, some mention was made of the typewriter in my political trial. I think the police searched his premises and they did confiscate a typewriter, and they did, I'm not too sure where they got it from, I can't confirm that, whether he got it from his house, from Mrs. Desai's house, or from the school. Those would be three likely. I think it was an old-fashioned typewriter, and they did, I think, if I remember correctly, produce this typewriter in my trial. And they did type out things and try to match, the typeface, and the way it would like maybe, have the letter T or whatever other letter not printed because the keys didn't work too well on that letter or something like that.
I'm going to try to ask direct questions. Did they question you about stencils?
Yes, during the interrogation. Yes. I was asked, tell us about the stencils, right? Now, my answer was I knew nothing of stencils, right? But I knew from Ahmed that he had cyclostyled in Kululeko 1 at the school.
And if we look at that stand firm, it would look as if a stencil was used to do that stand firm, eh?
Sorry, do I think the stencil?
If you look at Incorporated 2, where the court asks you from where it stands,
Yeah.
the stand firm looks as if a stencil was used to do
I
that.
think the printout here looks better than the Nkululeko one. This might have been a photocopy, and it may have been a photocopy.
Yeah. I've been covered for most of the questions, so I'm going to try to ask you direct questions. As to Quinton, Martin, and Henry, the main unit consisted of you, Indrison Moodley, and Ahmed Timol.
Yeah.
Was Quinton, Jacobson, or Henry any part of the main unit?
Not at all.
Thank you.
And the other person you mentioned, Indrison Moodley, he was inactive. He wasn't really an operative.
Right. Regarding the night that you were arrested, that was in October, summer. Can you remember whether you had short sleeve or long sleeves?
I had a long sleeve shirt.
Did you see any injuries on Ahmed Timol?
No.
You already addressed the question of a brawl and him being in a brawl, so I'm not going through that again. The distribution of leaflets. Did you ever distribute leaflets, illegal leaflets, other places than Johannesburg?
No.
Cape Town, Durban?
Not at all.
Do you know if Ahmed Timol ever
No.
distributed? Right. The age difference between you and Ahmed when you got arrested, what was your age and what was his
I
age?
think when I was arrested, I was probably around 22. Ahmed was probably a little over 29. I can't give you the exact age at this stage of Ahmed's.
Yes. I want to ask you a number of matters. You were in the vault, being questioned in the vault, sometimes the door were open. But in the vault there was also a safe, not so.
Oh, yes, yes.
Tell us a little bit about that safe.
There was a safe somewhere, I would say more on the one end, right? So if the door opened here, and this is the vault, not as large obviously, somewhere in that end, and so this would be the passageway, somewhere there. Perhaps a little away from the wall. And at one stage, one of the interrogating officers took me to the safe, opened it, and said, look into it. And I sort of looked at it, and he said, well, put your head in. I'm not too sure how large it was, but he said, we could push you in, and maybe even lock it up. and we have the, you know, the number for the safe, and you wouldn't, we could leave you there for good. And I looked at it. I wasn't too sure how big it was, and I wasn't too sure it would be possible. But anyway, I heard his story. There was a threatening story of me being put into the safe. That's all I can say.
Just describe that safe. Was it attached to the wall, or was it a self-standing?
I think it was self-standing. It was not a huge safe, but large. Yeah, not that kind
Large
of little.
enough to take a person, to take a body of a person.
I'm not too sure now, but I wouldn't say it would. Maybe a small person. I wasn't too big. Maybe. I wouldn't say it was too large. It certainly wasn't the kind of small safe you would buy in a shop to keep in your home. Right? It was a bigger safe, maybe used in a business or a police station.
Okay, to round off some other matters also, just standing on an A4 paper, can you just elaborate quickly on standing on an A4 paper as a method of torture?
Yeah. The idea is to locate you somewhere in the room, in a very precise spot, and that you're not supposed to move. So, for example, you are asked to stand on this paper and then say, lift 1 foot, at the back. Do you want me to demonstrate something at the bottom?
No, it's just the statue torture. I just wanted to ask you, did you have to do that kind of?
Yeah, I was asked to do that on this A4 paper, and then basically you have to stick to that paper, whether it's on 1 foot or 2, and you could be lifting your hand or you could be standing on 1 foot and in that position for a long time.
I do want you to give an indication to this court exactly where the mule kicks on your thigh was delivered. If you can give the court just an indication where on your thigh these mule kicks will deliver.
So the kicks would be, I'd be asked to say, go in a they say sit on a chair, there's no chair, so this is a hypothetical chair.
Half squat, in other words?
Sorry?
Half squat, in other words?
Half squat, something like that, right? Then there's one guy here, this side, this is this part of the room, right? And then they would, the guy on this side, and sometimes either both acting simultaneously or one doing, before the other or whatever, and basically it's like, a lot of hard kicking like this. You see, you take the side of your foot, or very often the front of the front foot, and then you take it, I suppose the mule kick, the word would sort of like ring a bell. You can take it like this, on the side, or like this, right? And then the other guy's doing this, and you go on endlessly like this. So you go like this side, right? It's hitting you on the thighs, this here, right? Mainly on the thighs. Occasionally you sort of going like this, it hits you on the side of your trunk, right? It's very, very painful, and it's continued non-stop.
Thank you.
So the kick would be on the side of the thighs, not at the back?
It could be in the back too, but mainly, they're standing on the sides mainly.
Oh, they were standing on the sides?
Yeah, and the thing is, if I'm here, for example, I'm here, there's one guy this side, suppose he wants to give me a good one on the thigh at the back, sure. So it would be around the side in the back, I would say. They're not facing me in the front.
While you're semi-squatting?
I'm semi-squatting, sometimes I'm rising up, I'm falling, whichever way it goes. You cannot hold that position for long when you're experiencing that. You cannot.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine. Just for the record, the witness left the stand to demonstrate a semi-sitting squat and indicated that there were people on both sides of him and kicking him on the thighs. That is more or less the picture as I see it.
Yeah, the exact spot on the thighs was shown out more or less in the middle of
Yes, to be in the middle of the thighs, yes.
The relevance of that would be shown later, my lord, so that's why I asked him that specifically. Okay. Incidentally, at John Foster or Johannesburg Central Police Station now, there are ordinary cells, and you were kept in that cells before you appeared in court, not so?
I was never kept in a cell at a time of detention. I was taken to Colonel Greiling's office on the 9th floor, and at the break of dawn, I was escorted out by two police security or police officers to the 9th floor and then put in room 103 and then transferred to the vault in that room.
Let me ask the question again. After you recuperated in Pretoria prison, etc., and when you came back, before you appeared for your own trial?
Oh, yes. Sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay, so when you appeared for your own trial, where were you held? Let me ask
right.
you.
I was brought from Pretoria and I was taken to the cells on the lower levels. I can't tell you exactly where the cell would be, and it was, I must tell you, it wasn't a very pleasant cell to be in.
Where? The cells
Lower
in
ground.
Which building?
It's John Foster Square. John Foster Square. In the lower levels, perhaps, I don't know whether it's basement or ground level, I can't say, but it's down. And it was a cell, and I was asked to sleep there. I should mention but the blankets that were there, just grey blankets, they were infested with lice.
Right now, we've talked a lot about your physical injuries, but can you tell us afterwards, obviously there would have also been psychological injuries, and you received treatment, and you had a counselor, not so?
That's right. I think anyone who goes through this sort of thing has to go through a process of healing, recovery, a remaking of yourself. I went to Robben Island and it was tough there, but when I came out and I was banned, I did okay. I was carrying on with my reading, I was doing my own studies, etc. And I was trying to get work, and people don't employ banned people, by the way. So that actually makes it difficult. My father didn't want me to go into his shop, and he felt that I needed to study. He knew I could do it, and he said, well, you just have to wait and so on, and he didn't want me there. He also felt like it might, I might just meet people there, whatever. He had his own, idea of protecting me, right? I might meet more people in Joburg or something. And and even if I went to work somewhere, I had to get permission, right? Now, anyway, I did manage to, move around, and I did break my banning order very frequently, almost every day. And at one stage, I was offered work by a friend who was an academic at the University of Witwatersrand, Tim Wilson, right? He was a medical specialist, and he taught at the university as well. And they were doing research on, traditional and non-traditional forms of, medicine, especially in Soweto, and they were trying to, do a good study, and, and so I had met Tim somewhere, and I worked on some, stuff for Tim Wilson, and there were other colleagues of his, and there were some black women also working with us. And I think he did notice at times I wasn't perhaps functioning too well. He would say, you know what, my sister-in-law is a clinical psychologist, and why don't you just have a chat with her? So I asked him, who's your sister-in-law? So he was married to Elsa Fisher, who is the younger daughter of Brown Fisher, right? And he said the elder daughter, Ruth, is the clinical psychologist, and she had done psychological studies in psychology in Britain, and she had stayed in Britain for a while and had married a Rhodesian, and they had lived together, and they were divorced, and she had come back to South Africa to basically be in South Africa. And he said, go see Ruth. And he arranged for me to meet her in a hospital somewhere. All this stuff is I'm not sure whether it was legal in terms of banning order or not, but I didn't care what the banning order said, right? I then went to see her in this hospital, and I was sitting on some bench somewhere in a kind of a waiting room, and I noticed, a smartly dressed woman coming down, and she sort of looked at me and, asked me if I'm, Salim, and I said yes. And
She said, very nice to meet you. And we had a little chat. And then she said, look, why don't you come to my place? Why don't you come to my place? And she gave me the address and, you know, her telephone. And we can talk further. We can talk a little further. I said, yeah, that will be good. Why not? Right? So I used to go there. I used to often go there by bus. Right? Sometimes I managed to get hold of a car and go to her place. I started, and then I met her in a very professional capacity, by the way, for a good few, weeks. About an hour at a time, sometimes longer, right? And we talked about various things and about, the kind of psychological trauma I face, and the kind of psychological problems I might have had from the torture experience. And we talked about this, and I sort of gave an account, not perhaps as detailed as I would have liked to. She didn't ask too many details. She didn't want me to have any kind of breakdown or anything. She was basically there to build my confidence and basically, allow me to, narrate a story freely to her. And she was an extremely good listener. Active listening is very much part of counseling and therapy, and she was an extremely good listener. And then she would probe a little further, and she wouldn't actually comment on the torture, but she would talk more about what I was feeling. So we went through that for a good few weeks. It was very professional. There were other little things too, and we would talk about that as well. I had a girlfriend who was a university lecturer at Cape Town University, and she would often come to Johannesburg, and sometimes we had a few difficulties in carrying on because of distance, etc. And we would occasionally talk about that as well. And then sometimes I would talk about to her, to Ruth, about my, parents' sort of response and the protective nature they had about me, and the kind of restrictions they wanted to impose on me in terms of my family life, right? And they would be very worried if I had friends coming to the house, and if I had, especially a white person coming, and my girlfriend was from Cape Town University, that would be a big problem. So I would explain to her that these things were a bit troubling for me, right? And they would even deter sometimes people who were students at WITS or somebody, but they would welcome people who were medical students or who were qualified doctors. But there was a very protective side to my parents, and for very good reasons, by the way. Right? I perfectly accept what they did. They were extremely protective of me, and they were watching out. And they were also, in a way, there was, I should say, a security police officer, non-uniformed, who came to check on me any day of the week that he chose, at least once a week, and I had to go every week to the local police station in Roodepoort, in the center of Roodepoort, to sign at a certain time on a Saturday morning to say I was there, right? And so I explained to her that all this stuff was a bit difficult for me, the signing of the book at the police. When I went to the police station, I suppose, my lord, you would probably remember the setup at police stations, and our learned advocate, Mr. Pretorius would remember this too. In the police stations, you had separate sections. So there would be a white section, and sometimes, and there would be a black section, and sometimes, there was a little wall, and then you stood on one side. So if I came there, sometimes they offered the book to me. They knew what I came for, so there was a book there, and I had to sign, date it, and just leave. And they would cite it, and then I'd go. There wasn't much conversation. But sometimes when they had, white people coming there for whatever reason, they would keep me waiting, and they would come in turns at different stages. I would be there, and I couldn't stand this. I'd stand there like about an hour sometimes. It was just weighing me down. And sometimes I'd even turn up a little later than what I had to do, because I was expecting that they would just make me wait. And it was another form of psychological. So I explained to Ruth all this. So there was, if you like, torture I had gone through in prison, which we went through in great detail, especially the impact it had made on me psychologically, traumatic side of it, if you like. And there was also new problems arising, like the banning order, right, etc., and the conditions I had to live under. So it was a very difficult time. And Ruth was extremely sympathetic. You know, a wonderful, warm personality. And so we went, and then at some point, we did this for a good few months, by the way. We did this for a good few months. At some point, we just decided, somehow mutually, that I don't need this therapy. I really don't need this therapy. And the thing is, I then continued to see her, sometimes even twice a week. We were very good friends. We started going out, you know, for meals, you know, even in places where we weren't necessarily allowed to go. We just went out. We drove around. She had an adopted daughter from England, right? And, you know, I played around with her daughter, and there were toys and whatnot. And, you know, I even met Ailsa, her sister there. And it was a normal, ordinary situation. In a way, what Ruth could establish as a professional person was that I was okay psychologically. Now, I should also say that Ruth was extremely helpful, and that when I was escaping from the country, this is the last point I'll make about Ruth, and this is all part of like me being put together. I was extremely well put together. You know, so this took about like, you know, more than a year, but I was good friends with Ruth right through. And on the night of my escape was planned. It was an elaborate plan, right, which I don't have to go into, right? But just as a little caution, should I ever be arrested on the night of my leaving, I wrote a letter to, you know, Helen Suzman, who was also very sympathetic, and we had also approached her for other things in relation to my banning order, right? And she had taken it to the minister at that time, Mr. Kruger, right? So I had made contact with Helen Suzman, and so I wrote this letter, and I talked a little about the torture I had gone through, not any details. I had also talked about the extreme sadism of the, you know, torturers, and I quoted something, you know, some book I had on Market Assad, right? And there was a good introduction about sadism, right? And I defined the term, and I explained how it impacted, what sadism meant to me in terms of my own experience. And she presented that letter to Helen Joseph, and some years later when I came back, she gave me a copy, right? She had kept a copy. So in a way, and when I came back, I used to see her, and I visited her place. I even stayed in her place at Melbourne again, right? Stayed with her a whole week. And so I did have to go through a healing phase. I would say that I had been, say, damaged psychologically, that it was the torture experience, I think, that damaged me enormously. I think I recovered fully. I had a strong will to survive. I also started reading a lot about torture, etc. I started looking at other people's experiences. I started rebuilding myself. By the time I left, I was a fully constituted, you know, person from a psychological, you know, fully functioning person from a psychological point of view. I had a total presence of mind. I got into more of the same mood or mode of living psychologically as I had lived previously.
Let's conclude on that, Dr. Essop. That concludes my question also. Thank you, my lord.
Thank you. I just want to know, for the record, what period of sentence was handed to you at the end of your trial?
I was given a sentence of 5 years, and that was the minimum, you know, under the act in which I was charged,
Yes.
under which I was charged.
And you served the whole of the 5 years in Robben Island?
When you got a sentence under certain acts which were part of the security legislation in the country, you served your sentence in its totality. So I served my full 5 years, initially a little at Low-Cop, but most of it was on Robben Island. And if you also, I know the other people, let me just make a little joke. I mean, all the stuff is very serious. You know the people who got life imprisonment, some of our great leaders who we greatly admire today, right? Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu and Ahmed Timol and everybody else. And Walter was a very jolly man, huh? Right? Very lovely guy. If he saw you ever a bit like, you know, on the low side, he would take you and play carom with you. We were allowed to play carom, you know, cue carom. So we had his cues, right? He was a good player, and he would say, come on, we have a good challenge. And yeah, you'd win sometimes, and I'd win sometimes, fine. And Walter, Nelson Mandela, whom we call Madiba there too, right? Ahmed Kathrada, and Ahmed Kathrada also had a kind of a jovial mood. He said, Salim, what you worried about? You know what, you got a parking ticket. You know, we got, you know what we're doing here? I said, yeah, I know you. I said, it was a parking ticket. Don't worry about it, just forget it. So 5 years was my parking ticket.
And after that, how long were you in the country before you left?
I was released on the 1st of November, 1977, and I escaped somewhere early in February 1981. I left on a night, and it was a planned, escape.
Fine. Thank you very much, Mr. Esop. I think, are there any further questions that you'd like to ask any of you?
Not from my side.
Yes. Yes. We are going to adjourn now, and we'll request your assistance as we get to the place where you were held. We'd like you to show us around, starting with the place on the ground. If you can identify the cells where you were kept after, just before your appearance in court.
Okay.
Starting from there, and then we'll go up. And you show us each and every one of the most important rooms you can recognize.
Yes.
And in particular, the vault, if it's still there. And I would like to see the position where you were when you saw what you say was Mr. Timol.
Okay. Yeah, I will do that.
Yes. And who's leading us in this? Mr. Torres, will you be leading us in this?
I can lead.
In this talk? Yes.
I can lead.
Yes. And how many people are they expecting there? I just want to make sure that we cover the rules here.
All the court personnel and the media, my lord, we've made arrangements beforehand. So if all the court personnel and that, we sensitized them beforehand about this.
They're expecting us parking arrangements, everything is
There is
in
parking arrangement, not for everybody, for the court obviously, and for Weber and Benzel. There's 3 parkings arranged, my lord.
Yes.
Specifically 3 parkings arranged, but not for all the other people, but 3 specifically has been arranged.
And you say, is the media and who else?
We said that the media will be there and all the people attending in the court that want to attend, we alerted them to that one.
And you have arranged that there shouldn't be any obstruction with the witness showing us around? And
We've tried our best for that, and also regarding the vault and the reconstruction, my lord, so
yes.
Hopefully everything will be in order. We thought that we'll go a little bit earlier, but hopefully everything will be in order. We
Yes.
alerted them to that.
Yes, if you could go a bit earlier. I don't know what time we make it now. What time are they expecting us there?
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock. Okay, then we'll meet all at 2 o'clock.
Can I ask that we meet in the garage where the lift goes up, my lord, if that would be a good starting point, my lord?
Yeah, well, somebody must show us. I've never been to the
No,
building,
we'll show the court, my lord.
where the garage should be and so on. Yeah, that's fine. I will be there, and I hope the whole legal team has to be there. And notes will have to be taken of the entire process.
My lord, I wonder if I can just alert you to a few things in relation to the inspection.
Yes.
We have asked a witness who will be appearing on Thursday, Dilshad Jatham, who was detained on the 9th and 10th floor at the same time as Timol, to be present as well, to also point out to your lordship.
Oh, the witness will be there.
That witness will also be present. Perhaps we could first deal with Mr. Esop and then move on to her.
Yes, okay, okay. And he will be, you say he'll be testifying on?
I beg your pardon, she'll be testifying on
Oh,
Friday.
she will be testifying on Friday.
On Friday.
Okay, that's the witness you told me about on Friday.
One other matter, my lord, that you should know in advance. The elevators in the building don't work.
Oh, no.
That was the case in our previous visit, and I understand that it's still the case.
I hope not.
It probably will require walking up 10 floors.
Yes, it's supposed to be an inspection in local.
We did
Mr.
offer
Dwani we should all not go there for what used to go there, what used to go on there, and I hope you understand what I mean. But
yes.
we'll make it. We'll have to go there. I must see each and every place that has been described.
Indeed, my lord, there are multiple elevators in that building, and not a single one is working. Not one.
If
my
there's
lord,
a deception for this team, so be it. But we'll go there.
Indeed. My lord, we would also want you to look at the roof of the building above room 1026. It's quickly accessible from the 10th floor.
Okay. Okay, fine.
As the court pleases.
You will lead the way. You'll show us the relevant places where we need to go, and then we'll take it from there. I'm not certain whether when we come back, what time we're coming back.
My lord, I doubt whether there'll be time to come back to court this afternoon. I think we'll spend the whole afternoon in the building.
The whole afternoon, and until tomorrow. We'll adjourn the court now and report back here tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
As the court pleases.
Mr. Esop, let me take this opportunity to say thank you very much for your evidence. I have read, as I said, your affidavit, and indeed you testified in respect of a number of issues that are in that affidavit. Yeah, your evidence is very critical, and I'm aware that your evidence did not serve in the inquest that was held. So it's new evidence insofar as this inquest is concerned. And I believe it will help us a great deal. I would still like you to come back to do the identification. You recall that, the identification of the people who were interrogating you. We'll try and get their photographs, at least the photographs of people who were there, and you identify them. As you do, then they will be matched with the names for the purpose of the record. And I hope I will get your cooperation in that regard. Do you agree to do so?
Yes, I agree to come back, and I will. I know the date of the second hearing,
Yes.
and I'll try to come a few days before.
Yes.
I am returning in the middle of the month, next month, so I'll just probably have to get the ticket booked in advance,
Yes.
so I don't have any problems, right? I could get that done as well, have it booked in advance.
I'm just sorry for what you went through as we are relating, and I could see that it was not easy for you to tell this court the ordeal that you went through. And perhaps on a lighter vein, I would say, I'm sorry that your parents said you must study medicine and not law. And I believe you would have made a very good lawyer.
Yeah.
Yes. On that note, then we'll adjourn, and you will help us with the.
Yes. Thank you very much, my lordship.
Yes. We adjourned, and we'll meet 2 o'clock at the inspection in loco, and then we'll resume tomorrow with the proceedings.